this episode of the Summit series, we sit down and talk to Damian Fasciani. Damian is a technology and product executive leader with around 20 years or so of experience leading teams and technology for some of the fastest growing technology companies in Australia and worldwide. In this conversation, we spoke about so many amazing things. I think one of the key takeaways, or a few of the key takeaways, if you are interested in how to get better as a leader, people-centric leadership philosophies, how to interview better, how to be a better interviewee, and just lots of other areas around how to develop and improve yourself, then this is absolutely the conversation for you. Damian has spent some time at Caden Property Group, Starez, REA, where he led the digital transformation and was head of enterprise technology, and Culture Amp. And he actually shares some insights around the interview experience there and how that shaped his interview philosophy moving forward. And he is currently the VP of Product and Engineering at Expert360. Thank you very much for joining me. Please enjoy the episode with myself, Joel, and Damian. So when I was doing my research and looking at the companies that you worked at, you've worked for some incredible companies, right? Starez, Culture Amp, REA, Expert360. What was the compass that you used? Was there key things that you looked for and why you joined those businesses? Was there common themes around that? Because they're obviously all very different industries. I feel like listeners would get value from that. They might be sitting there trying to make a decision. What have you used that has worked for you, Damian?
Yeah, I guess there's two core things that I gravitate to when I was looking at those roles. The first and foremost is the type of leader that's running that organization. So the CEO in particular, and where they've led, like where the company has come from under that person's leadership, and do I gravitate to that leader, and do I believe in that leader's vision? So that's first and foremost, because if I can't resonate with that, then there's no point me being in the role that I'm in. Second to that is, how does that business see technology? Do they see it as an enabler, and are they investing in technology? And when we say investment, it's looking at things like, well, what does the team look like? What does the capability look like? What is the historical investment in technology? What does it look like leading up to that point where you've got to make a decision about taking a role? I guess how you figure these things out when you're going through an interview stage, I've changed over the years as I've gotten a little bit older, and I've found new ways to kind of make sure I've got the things I need to make an intuitive decision. But like I said, leadership first and foremost, and then the investment in technology and how the business perceives and sees technology in the business. So they're the two key things.
I'd be really interested how you come up with it, because certainly early in my career, you meet great business owners. Are great. They give you a great vision. They give you a great story. They should be, right? Because they're ultimately the ultimate salesperson of their business. So they're telling you a great vision. But sometimes when you join a company, or I've had friends that join companies and, oh my God, like the reality was very different to the way that the CEO was describing it. The tech is non-existent. There's no funding in it. There's no, yes, we need IT, but we have no idea what to do with it. Like, it can be very, the vision reality can be very different. How do you sort of detect that, I guess, without walking into their business, I guess?
Yeah, it can be challenging. It can be tough, because you can choose to listen to what they tell you on face value when they make a decision, or you or what I tend to do is ask similar questions along the interview process and kind of see what the consistency of the responses look like between senior leadership and peers that are working in that organization. I think also doing a bit of background checking on the leaders in an organization and looking at where they've come from themselves, because that gives me a bit of an indication of what their experience looks like and what they've kind of brought to their roles working for that organization. So if I'm looking at a leader that works for a product-centric company or a technology company, I would want to see similar traits in that leader, having come from similar businesses in the past, with similar expertise attached to previous roles. Otherwise, if I see a jump from one expertise to another one, having worked for businesses in completely different industries with different expertise, I start to question what you're going to get out of that leader and whether I can keep learning and aligning with potentially where that leader is at. So I think it comes with asking the right questions and doing some of your own research as well. And I've always been big on using my my network to see kind of like doing reference checks on organizations, similar to what organizations do on us when we're going for a role, and trying to do a bit of background checking on, you know, if you know people that have interfaced with those companies before, what has it been like dealing with those organizations? What's the engagement been like? And you hopefully what you want out of that is picking up a bit of a pattern on what those companies look like.
You're sort of almost interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you into a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's, I think it's normal. I think most organizations do this. You're interviewing for a role, and the organization, if they want you, will sell the organization and sell what they're doing. And typically when you're selling something, you can oversell it as well. So I think it's on you to do as much research and background checking as you can. So hopefully you know what you're walking into and you know what the current state is. And there's plenty of stories of people joining organizations and then finding out 2-3 months later that the state of what they've inherited is a little bit different to what was talked about.
Yeah.
In the
rose-tinted glasses. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also, I mean, some of the brands of those organizations I've worked for are very well known in the industry as well. And there's also the association working with organizations that have got a really strong reputation in the industry, and sometimes associated with those brands and that reputation, you know, you're going to walk into a company with some great, intelligent people that have got good experience themselves. And for me, it's been really important to keep learning and to keep evolving. So that career development for me has been very, very important. No matter what level you're at or what role you're going into, you've got to keep learning, and you only do that by, I think, working with great people and having people around you that will challenge you and challenge your decision making. So it's only one caveat I've always told people when they're looking at that sort of the brand of the company, particularly when you get to that higher echelon of like the big tech companies, the big consulting companies, you know, the EYs, the Accentures, the Oracles, the whatever, that you can find anybody that hates them. Plenty of people hate Oracle. Plenty of people hate Accenture and PwC and all that kind of stuff, because they've just got this reputation. They're 30, 40-year-old tech companies. At some point, they've screwed somebody or they've done the wrong thing, because it's a gigantic multi-billion-dollar corporation. And I always tell people that in that position, it's like, okay, yes, but they're still great organizations to work with. If the team that you're going to be working with and the role that you're going to be working in is still interesting and valuable, you'll still learn a lot. I learned a lot working at Oracle, and I've got a lot of success and a lot of connections and networks and opportunities I worked on, even though I worked at, you know, big evil red kind of thing. And so if I'd taken some of my friends' advice, I don't work at Oracle, they're horrible, then and not taken it, I would have ended up in a different part of my career and maybe not gone on to those sort of bigger IT companies and had the opportunities that I had. So there's a balance of like, yes, the brand speaks a lot, but also at the same time, you need to couch that in the sort of the narrative of big brands in IT is that sometimes they're just being awash with bad. All the big vendors are bad. None of them are great. They've all done something wrong at one point in their time. So it's just about working through that and focusing, as you said, on the team and who you're going to be working with and what's the opportunity that it's giving you, basically. Yeah, exactly. I think your philosophy and your mindset going into these things is really, really important, because you can either have the glass half empty or the glass half full approach. That there's going to be good opportunity no matter where you are, and you're going to have challenges and things you don't like no matter where you are as well, whether it's Google, Oracle, wherever else. So you have to try and find or have the that positive mindset that you can find opportunity no matter where you are. It's up to you whether you want to find it, hold on to it, and deliver something of value and learn from that. So we can take that. If we can hold on to that, we're better for it.
Absolutely, yeah. And another thing that I really like, sorry, Kris, that the big vendors do as well is they do that long gauntlet interview process, right? Where you interview with your direct boss and then usually their boss and the sales guy and then the HR lady. Like, you go through all of these steps, which can seem, my God, this is so much work. But I think it sort of reflects on what you said before, that it's about the more people you can speak to in the company, the more likely you are to get those consistent stories or the inconsistent messages. I think when you speak to a small company, just by the nature of them being smaller, they're not going to have that long gauntlet that maybe it's only one interview, but it can be beneficial even in a small company to speak to the CEO and then speak to the engineering team and try and get a couple of interviews of yourself lined up internally to the company so you can more properly evaluate. Because at least when the bigger companies, you get a chance to see, okay, there's 8 stories, they're all inconsistent. Okay, maybe that's not for me. Or there's 8 stories, but they're actually pretty consistent. Okay, maybe this is the pathway. So I think trying to get more interviews in a small company would be quite useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think it's hard to make a call when you've got 1 or 2 interviews at an organization as opposed to, finding that balance where you've spoken to maybe 5 or 6 people in different parts of the organization, and you can hopefully get a bit of a sense through prep work, knowing what questions you want to ask as well. I mean, you're going to get a barrage of questions, but the more people you speak to, the greater assessment you can make. You take that away and you think, okay, I've spoken to 6 people across 3 different areas, and I've spoken with someone on the executive team, and hopefully that with your due diligence, you can make an assessment on, well, is this environment right for me? A lot of it comes down to prep work and being organized and coming into an interview, knowing what you're going to ask, not just how am I going to answer a whole bunch of questions, but what am I going to ask, and making sure you've got some really meaningful questions ready to go, so you can build your own assessment on that information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like because you have those foundational principles, you're making the decision based on them rather than it's got a great brand or the technology is great. That's awesome, but you've got multiple data points, you've got your references, you've got your intuition, you've got the interviews, you've got all of these different questions, and knowing your value going into an interview process, I think is so important. I speak to lots of leaders who go into the interview and maybe they've been out of work for a bit, so they really want to get the job, and they maybe forget some of the value they bring, and they're trying to almost perform an interview. And I think it's so important to really know your value and ask those questions that, I mean, I'm a big believer on alignment. Like, getting that alignment nailed at the start, I think just sets you up for success. And you can work for the best brands in the world, but the impact that you make might not be there because you haven't done the due diligence at the start of the process, and vice versa. So I think those principles that you have will stand you in good stead, because if they don't tick the box, it doesn't matter how good the brand is, right?
No, absolutely. And I think as we get more experience through our career, you get a little bit better at knowing what questions to ask, and based on the role you're going for, you can start to prioritize the types of things that you want alignment on and some of the things you're willing to compromise, because, if I get 4 out of the 6 things that are important to me, then I can compromise on those other 2. I need to make sure the strategy, the financial health of the organization, and autonomy in decision making as a senior leader, we need alignment. I need alignment on those things. The tech stack and other bits and pieces, I can influence that over time. That they need to trust me. I need to build trust. So, yeah, I think knowing what's important to you, doing due diligence on that, and going into those conversations really sets you up for success, I think.
I love that. What's the best question that you've been asked in the interview when you're doing the interviewing? What's the best one?
The best question I've been asked?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, that's a tough question. I've been asked so many questions, so many different questions. Look, I've got 2 answers to this question. I think, to be very honest, I think the question that I've always struggled to answer, and it's come up quite a bit, is I would often get asked, what's my superpower? And I've had trouble answering that question. And the reason why I've had trouble answering it is because I've built my expertise and my skill sets over a long period of time with the strategy of being having, I guess, a broad set of skills, and I've prided myself in broad experience. So when someone says to me, "What's your superpower?" My mind kind of goes to like one thing that stands above everything else. And I don't like answering that question because I feel like my strength is, I've got strength across multiple areas. It's, it's technology, it's being product centric, it's resonating with human beings and building teams. I mean, if I had to answer it now, above everything else, it would be bringing people together and being a people leader. Like that to me is probably my strength, but that I've struggled to answer that question. What's your superpower? The other one was, I remember going through the interview process at Cultramp in particular, and one of my first interviews was with the CEO, and it wasn't necessarily a black and white question. It was probably more of a unique experience. He asked me to take him through my background and my life from school all the way through to work, and it was really the CEO, understanding what made me tick, what my family life was like. And I think he was trying to get to my morals, my values, patterns in my life, the things that I gravitated to and what I didn't gravitate to. So it really wasn't about my expertise and my experience. We got to that, in a different conversation. But I found that to be a very different process, a very joyful one as well, because what I could see was that, a key leader in the business, the key leader in the business, really making time to understand me, who I am as a human being before anything else. And up until that point, I'd never been through anything like that in an interview before.
Yeah. Really sets a culture that you're coming into to some extent.
Yeah. So, they're the two things that come to mind, the two questions.
I sent on that superpower. I've had the superpower question before, and I too have struggled with it. And I guess I don't like it. I know, Damian, I know you like Batman. I think it's the difference between Superman and Batman, right? Because a superpower implies something that you just got given. You didn't work for it. Superman just rocks up and he's amazing. Whereas Batman, I mean, he was rich, sure, but he had to work to be good at what he was doing. So I don't feel like Batman doesn't have superpowers. Batman is just really, really good. And I think when you ask someone, what's your superpower? That's kind of saying, what's your natural gift that you've just been spoilt with? Like, that's interesting to know. That's great. That's listening, but it's all the other things that I've worked on that have made me better. Everyone asks that classic, like, what's your weakness question? Because as if anybody actually answers that honestly with an actual weakness. And when I get those questions, I always just go, well, here's the thing that I'm working on right now. Like, here's the thing that I'm, still think that I need improvement on. And this is what I'm doing to improve, to make this better, because it's this part of my, not superpowers, just my skills, just trying to make me a better superhero.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's why I'm such a big Batman fan, because I resonate with the determination, the work rate, the crusade of being better and doing everything in your power to be the best person you can be and doing what you believe is right. So, and you can take those things into your career around work rate. And it was something my father spoke to me about when I was young, and I still remember. It's like he always said to me, like, when you finish uni and you're going to work, no one's really going to give you anything. You've got to work for it, and you've got to ask for it. If you don't ask, you don't get, and you've got to put yourself in the position to be happy and to keep moving forward. So, and at the time I kind of took that as, I've got to work hard and I've got to put in the work rate, and you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the work rate and the commitment, it's only going to get you so far. And I think Batman kind of, it personifies that. But I've used that mindset with everything in my career. And I've tried to instill that in others, because then you yourself and other people, they become coachable when they've got that philosophy.
Question, as I say, the one that I like as an interview question is, maybe what I'm asking it, but certainly receiving is even interesting, is the classic, or what are you going to do in the first 100 days of the job? I actually really like that one, because if you ask it, it's a good way to, if you've done your research, like you said, Damian, good way to sort of talk about, okay, I already actually know a lot about your company, and this is what, I talk to so-and-so and I do this kind of thing, I focus on this. But it is a good way to sort of discuss that you're having that strategic thinking, that you're, hey, I'm thinking about this is what I would do, and this is how we're getting stakeholder engagement. And there's sort of a pro formal way of answering it, but you can be sort of novel. And I think it's a smart interview question because it gets to be a little bit more practical. Okay, I've got the job. This is what I'm going to do. In that sort of the classic, what is the president or prime minister doing in his first 100 days of office? Same thing, you joining a new company. This is what I'm going to do in that first 100 days. It's an interesting one.
No, I love that. And when I went through the interview process at Expert 360, where I'm at now, I really appreciated that the last point in that process where, they gave me a practical use case and I had to put together a strategy deck in a pretty short period of time. But I really enjoyed the practical side of putting something together, and it allowed me to show them how I would practically go about solving some real life product problems, and how I would lay out the plan to build an engineering and product strategy and what that means for me and how I would materialize that. And I think it's very similar to the question around what would you do in your first 100 days. I really enjoyed laying it out, putting pen to paper and then presenting it back to them. And I think for certain roles, I've certainly myself gravitated to putting a use case in front of people and giving them time to work through it, because then you start to see kind of how they tick and how they operate and how they will approach certain problems or opportunities.
Yes, they're good ones because you don't actually really care about the answer. What you actually care about is the angle and the way that they thought about it, and that they, how they achieved it. And either giving them a lot of time and then you see the output, or even just giving them the one under pressure, again, for the right kind of role, because I don't actually want you to do strategy under pressure normally, but sometimes you have to. So they can be interesting, not because of the output, but the method the person applied along the way, and the interesting things that they came up with to get there. You go, oh, okay, I like your brain. I like how that works. The way that works is how we would want in our organization. Answer's wrong or missing stuff, but that's fine because you haven't
got the context properly yet. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. You get to see how people tick. And I think more often than not, the answer is going to be off because you don't have all the business context about whatever it is. So, no, I totally agree.
But sometimes you might have that nugget and they go, oh, actually, brilliant. Like, because we have to hire you now because we need that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you must interview a lot of people now, though. Is there questions that you ask? Is there things that you're looking for when you're speaking to your team or who you're potentially going to bring into the organization?
Look, I think when I interview people, my number one rule around interviewing is get an assessment on what they will add to the culture and who they are as a person first, above the skill sets and the expertise. My philosophy with that has always been to try and catch people out in the interview process, get them as comfortable as possible so you can see the best version of them and assess. I always try and assess, okay, well, if I bring them in, what are they going to, a lot of people talk about cultural fit, but what I've learned in recent times is what can they add to the culture? How will the culture evolve with this person coming in? So for me, it's around the person, what can they add to the culture? And I'd love to ask questions around their values. If they were to create a startup, what are the pillars or the values that they would build that startup on? And I would get them to talk.
That's a good one.
And that gives me a bit of a sense of just how they think and whether I get a stock standard response around those types of values, or I get some surprising values sometimes from people and I think, wow, okay, I can understand kind of what makes you tick. The other one is around what do I need to do? Like, how do you want me to lead you? How do you want me to coach you and set you up for success? What does a good leader look like? And what would I be doing if I'm a bad leader in your eyes? And some people can answer that quite easily, and some people struggle to answer it. But again, it gives me an indication of what I need to work on to have a successful relationship with that person and what they want from me and whether I think that's reasonable or not. So I find those questions to be very insightful.
All too often I see lots of people treat interviews as like an adversarial thing, that I've got to trick the person, or I've got to ask them that brain teaser that's just going to throw them off, or I've got to come in and go, okay, so Kris, what's your weakness? What's wrong with you? And I think that's that can be interesting and get some interesting responses if you get the right kind of person that can respond into that kind of pressure. But it's not reflective of most people. And I've got friends. I have a great friend he's amazing. He's really good in his job. He's a great person and a great addition to any team, but he just sucks at interviews. He is so horrible at interviews. In fact, he once said, "I need help." It's not you, Kris. And he even asked me one day, he said, could you interview me? Could you just I'm not for a job. Can you come to my house? We'll sit down and let's just do a pretend interview so I can just practice, because I'm just really struggling to get past the interview stage. And I sat down with my friend who I've known for decades and sat down and go, okay, Mr. X, whoever it is, I'm not going to say who it is. And I started interviewing him, and he was nervous. He was super awkward and nervous with me, who he's known for 20 years at that point. I'm like, dude, what's wrong? And he's like, I just get so nervous. And I totally agree with you. Actually make an interview process be calm and hey, it's fine. Don't worry. Chill out. This is a weird point in time where you and I are going to be across the table. But once we work together, we're going to be together. It's going to be connected. We're going to be working. It's why make it so adversarial? Because you miss out on that. All these employers are missing out on my friend who was, and he sort of got over it hopefully recently because he's got some great jobs, but they're missing out on this skill and this amazing person who delivers a lot of value to an organization and is, loud and talkative and like a quiet person. It's just, he just has this allergic reaction to the interview process.
I think it's an interesting one because it's, and I've spoken to some people in the industry I'm in now around where we think interviewing and vetting is going over the next decade, and how we interview, what data points we look at to assess people, whether it's their LinkedIn profile, their CV, or whatever it looks like, and really being able to assess what good quality talent looks like. And I just think that's ripe for disruption, over the next 5 to 8 years. It's kind of like, great students that are academically really smart and can sit in an exam under pressure and ace the exam, whereas you've got other people that are more practical, will struggle at exams, but they're not silly people. It's just how you assess talent and how you assess how good someone is. I fundamentally believe there are different ways on assessing what good looks like, and I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where the talent industry goes with how we assess people.
There is something I want to touch on just around the interviewing. So when, the part I don't understand when I'm working with leaders, for example, is they put on a persona for interview. So it's the same as the client, the person puts on a persona. So they answer questions in a certain way. They dress themselves up in a certain way. And I've never understood that the whole time I've been in recruitment, because you're not being hired for that person. You're being hired for your interview version of that person. So you have 2 people on a date, essentially pretending they're different people.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, over the years, I've always tried to, I've had at the forefront of my mind to just be me and break the ice. And I think that's why when I've interviewed people, I've always done the cultural stuff and anchored on the cultural stuff up front to really understand the human being before you go into assessing expertise and skills. So, but I think the critical point, what's most important with that, I think, is you showing the person you're interviewing that you're there to set them up for success. It's a casual, calm conversation, and I've been very purposeful in the language I've used in interviews to really make sure that people feel super comfortable and they can unzip the interview persona and just be them. And I've done that by explaining to people who I am, what my hobbies are, and what I do. And sometimes I've opened interviews like that. You give a brief introduction on the role in the organization, but I've then at times gone into a bit of background on me as a person, who I am, what I do outside of work, and just try and build that human connection. And people can kind of go from being stiff to, loosening up a little bit. And then you can see them for who they are. And they're more than likely to operate at their best when they feel comfortable and they feel like there's a bit of a connection there. Otherwise, you both build a different persona, and then over a period of time, if that person gets the job and you start working, then you're two different people down the track. It's so I think that's really important.
Setting can make a difference as well. I mean, it's harder now with remote working and virtual Zooms and whatnot, but certainly before pre-COVID, I would try and do interviews face to face, coffee shop, something that isn't the boardroom with me on one side of the table and you on the other side of the table and a bunch of papers and I'm writing notes. Like it's just so examinatory kind of thing. But I mean, harder now with the virtual kind of environment. How do you make people feel comfortable when we're in this sort of talking heads mode? You're right. It's about that being casual and having, hey, chill, how you going? Like just chat. And then, hey, let's get into the formal part of it. So tell me about your skills, et cetera, et cetera. I think that helps break the ice just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can, if it's viable, I will meet the person face to face. I don't think, there's no technology experience that's that's better than sitting
absolutely
someone and picking up on mannerisms and just building a human connection face to face. Like that's the most powerful thing. So if I can do that, I will do that.
Yeah, at Inmanly we're a completely remote organization. In fact, there's a handful of employees I still haven't met face to face. Most of them I've managed to try and get to, but it's good because it lets us get a chance to hire sort of anywhere, find the right talent. But there is that downside that it is difficult to have that personable connection with the virtual talking head. And part of the reason why I'm here in Austria is to meet or see for the first time face to face some of the employees that I have hired that have been working with me for like more than a year. And meet them face to face, and being here and having that connection with them has meant we've got a stronger connection going forward.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Well, like we're coming out of COVID, and even throughout COVID, with people, interviewing and getting work, and being onboarded remotely, and not meeting your peers and people you work with. But yeah, I agree with you. I think going on a trip and meeting people, it really accelerates the maturity of the relationship and builds trust. And as humans, we're made to connect and be with each other, and that's what I fundamentally believe anyway. So there's nothing more powerful than getting together in a room, having that whiteboard session and having a coffee, being able to tap someone on a shoulder and talk to them about something without...
I've still never found a good replacement to a whiteboard. Still engineering me, love to get on a whiteboard. Let's discuss this problem. Lots of boxes and square lines. And yes, I've got Miro and I've got a whole bunch of other Canvas tools and Figma, whatever, but they're not the same. They're not the same as two engineers with markers on a whiteboard scrolling, and they'd either be what do we draw? But you connect with the person, you see how they think, you solve problems so much better. If someone could crack virtual whiteboards, it'd be amazing.
I totally agree. I love Miro and all those tools, but getting in front of a whiteboard and mapping something out, and then the power of leaving it on the whiteboard in the office. There's been so many times in my career where I've you have an architectural diagram or some type of diagram on a board with someone in your team, but then other people walk past, they have a look at it, and then it generates a conversation. Whether they need context on something or whether that helps them with solving a different problem in another team. And that connection, with hybrid working, we definitely haven't cracked that yet. And I don't know at this stage whether we will. I just think nothing's more powerful than people coming together.
Because I've did some stuff on like the metaverse, and I think it was Lex Friedman that had interviewed someone, Zuckerberg, I think, and it was like fully. Did you see that fully on the metaverse?
I did. I saw that. Yeah.
It did, and it still didn't feel like it was amazing, but is it the intuition that you get from being close, or is it the little parts of the conversation that you don't see in terms of like body language and energy and different things like that? Or like, what do you think is fundamentally missing from having a call here to sitting down across the table from each other and talking?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think little nuances around, like what you were saying with body language, how people are seated, the eye connection. I think two humans in a room create an energy, whether it's good energy, there is an energy there that technology cannot artificially create for us. if I look back to what my work had looked like pre-COVID, post-COVID, I feel like the things we used to complain about, being interrupted in an office, having too many meetings, commuting to and from work, I speak for myself here. I think those things added to a healthy day-to-day operating environment, because we needed the disconnect from the screen. We needed screen time. We needed a human conversation. We needed a coffee break because we were working for 3 hours straight. Whereas me, at least at home, I got to be very purposeful with creating multiple Zoom meetings because I need to talk with all these people. Then you separate from that. It's very rigid. I'm working by myself. If I want to bounce an idea off, I can't just tap someone on the shoulder. I then need to create another meeting, or I have a Slack conversation. And I just think
the spontaneity disappears. You can't just, hey, Kris, how does random thought? What do you think? Kind of thing. You have to schedule it and organize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I just think biologically, we, as humans, we create this energy when we're together.
Yeah.
I don't think human beings are meant to be isolated for long periods of time. I just don't think mankind and society, we're not built for that. And there will be people that say, I prefer to work from home, and that's okay. Totally respect that. But fundamentally, I do believe that the majority of people should be together for periods of time. I think it's healthy for our mental well-being. It accelerates everything from ideas to building solutions to building relationships. And we get all the things we need by being together. Like I was saying before, we get the screen time, we get the conversations, we get the relationship building. We get those things very organically by being together. Whereas if you're isolated, you have to be very purposeful to still try and build those things and do those things. And it's just not the same unless we fast forward into the future and we've got holograms and it's like being together, and it's, we're still a while away from something like that. But I certainly myself, I get a lot of energy from being with people.
Yeah.
I certainly think that we'll get there, maybe not the full holograms, but certainly the metaverse stuff or VR, whatever. But where it is today, I think doesn't work because the latency is atrocious. Like, it's just that there's that tactility of like, I'm going whiteboard and quickly drawing something, and you go real quick because you're not drawing perfect squares. You just, smudge, line, arrows, lines everywhere. You just can't get that speed. And I think back to my career when I was back at the office, and my co-founder Courtney and I worked together, and we would have massive, heated, passionate debates about like who was right about the strategy or how we do. And then he and I have a great working relationship where we can be, you might think that we're being horrible and fighting each other, but actually that's us working together and nutting out a problem at the end of it. We walk away and go, yeah, we've got an answer now. One of my employees once told me that Courtney and I both think out loud. So we're always, talking and writing on the boards. And I think those are so fun. And we haven't been able to really do that as much now that we're virtual. I catch up with Courtney all the time physically because we're in the same, usually when I'm in the same city, but right now I'm not. And it's hard because there isn't a let's draw on a board or here's my document I've written. Like, it doesn't have that tactility or that you can move around the space. You can both be drawing simultaneously and vigorously drawing over each other and that kind of thing. I think we'll get there with technology because I think there are benefits of remote working are great that, you don't have to have that commute time, which I agree. It's nice having that downtime. I definitely agree with you. I actually started doing I'm going to walk around the block. I'm going to leave the house when I finish work, going to walk around the block, and I'm going to come back into the house to simulate coming back home kind of thing, even though I just walk around the block, because you do need that decompression time.
You need the separation. What I think about is the younger folks who are starting out in their career, whether it be in engineering, sales, tech, whatever. I think of them a lot because the learning that you get from just being around people, and it's not necessarily a learning session, it's just hearing people and just kind of learning by proxy, I suppose, or learning what not to do, or oh, that was a good call, or that went well. And I think the other thing is it pushes people out of their comfort zone. So if someone is naturally quite introverted and they kind of maybe want to be isolated a bit, it would push them to have to go into the office or be around people, so they would develop that skill as a result of it. But now I feel like that's removed, so people don't have that.
And it's also, it's so much easier to give feedback. I mean, I know that I've had issues or struggles with, a developer may not doing something great. Like it's, hey, this piece of code is amazing. I need we need to discuss it. And when you're just in the office, you go, hey, Kris, can we just have a chat about this, blah, blah, blah. It's super casual and no one's upset. But when the boss then schedules a Zoom meeting with you to discuss your code, you're like, oh no, what have I done? I've really screwed up. Like it becomes all of a sudden like this formal code review and disciplinary action. It's like, no, I just want to have a chat about this. Like this wasn't great. You could do better. It's all, so as a manager, you have to do so much more work in these meetings to go, okay, look, I want to preface this is not disciplinary. This is just, I want to try to set the tone of what the conversation is trying to be. But it's so difficult when it's face to face. It's just a tap on the shoulder, a quick chat, walk away. Like it's no big deal. It's so hard to make virtual things not seem serious when you have them.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I think if I think back to when I started at REA back in 2010, the first couple of years I learned so much by observing other teams and looking at what was going on around me. Like I remember, like in the old building, we had corporate IT, we had the business functions on a separate level to the developers and the site operations team that were running the website. And going on that third floor, I still remember going on that third floor and looking at the evolution of moving from site operations to DevOps to the little things like cards on the walls and looking at agile development teams were working back in 2010. Like I purposely would go up and have a look at those things and try and organize meetings on that floor. So I could listen and see what was going on around me, look at the product teams. And even back then, when I was not working in those teams, you start to develop a sense of what good looks like and what bad looks like because you've got all that around you. So to your point, thinking about the younger folks that are coming out of uni or grads that are going into the workplace and some of them wanting to gravitate and work from home and only come into the office a little bit of time, like I get concerns around things like learning by proxy and pairing with other people in person. And even if you're a developer, looking at what the marketing people and the salespeople are doing and getting an understanding of how the business operates beyond you cutting code every day. And you might be a junior or a mid-level engineer. You don't need to do those things or you don't need those things right here and right now, but observing and seeing those people and understand what's happening on the floor, you just don't get those things working remotely. And the other thing as well, I think I don't know how to refer to it, but just the science of having a negotiation and a conversation with someone in person is very different to doing it on a Zoom call or doing it on a Google Meet. Like learning how to hold your own, have a conversation, have a back and forth with someone in person is very different in a business doing it in person as opposed to doing it remotely. I think you build a level of confidence within yourself by doing it in person and learning how to exchange with another human being face to face rather than doing it behind a screen. I fear that we're going to lose that more and more as a technology. I fear we're going to lose that. We're going to move away from those things. And I just think that they're really powerful skill sets that we should attain. And
there's a sort of a fundamental speed of light problem with these kind of communication. Even in this conversation we're having now, it's a little hard to jump in, or it's a little hard to have that back and forth. If we were sitting in a room together, it'd be much more back and forth because there's that 1 or 2 second delay from me starting to talk and you hearing it. I was once on a Teams call and my business partner was, we both had to be on the same call, but for some reason we're out and about, so it was on our phones. So I could hear him talking and then I could hear him through the internet. And it was so hard. You can never be in the same room as somebody else on the Teams call because I hear him talking and then 2 seconds later you hear the same words. It's so disconcerting. And it just really highlighted to me the fundamental challenge with a Teams or a Zoom call where it has to really only be one person talking. Okay, they're finished. Okay, now the next person can talk. And you just don't get that. If we're sitting down in a boardroom, 2 or 3 or 4 people might be talking somewhat simultaneously because we can pick up on the body cues. It's quicker to go, I can jump in, I can add a comment, I can reflect on that, etc. It's so much more difficult on a virtual environment.
Absolutely.
So from a purely practical point of view, right? Say some engineers or product managers or whoever, designers are listening to this and they're in the position of they're fully remote and their company is fully remote, right? They've got a good culture, they talk on Slack, etc. What strategies or things could they put in place? Or what have you seen work in that environment? Damian, is there anything that you would mention there?
Yeah, look, I think it's still tough. I mean, in the role I'm in now at Expert 360, my team is fully remote and dispersed. I've got some engineers in Sydney, some in New Zealand, some, and I'm in Melbourne, and so we don't physically come together much at all. So I'm pretty much in that situation. So I think if I look at what we're doing now, I think one of the most fundamental things is to have a cadence and have some level of repetition. And they're basic ceremonies that a lot of other teams will have, but they carry a lot of weight because we connect. So, we have our daily stand-ups Monday to Thursday for 15 to 20 minutes. And we have a retro. We try and do a retro every 6 to 8 weeks where, we use a Miro board and we talk about what's worked, what hasn't worked. And everyone gets a voice and everyone gets time to add to that. We have music that plays in the background while we're on the call, and we've got the Miro board. And we always make sure we've got outcomes, not outcomes, but we've got to-dos that come out of those sessions because we know we want to iteratively improve over a period of time. The other thing that I think we do that works as well, and I didn't put this in, I inherited this as part of coming into the team. Okay. We have a virtual happy hour every Friday from 3 till 4 o'clock, where we get online and we play games and we have conversations, and we get to the end of the week and it's kind of like the virtual get together of having a beer without having the beer, but we'll play online games and we'll do bits and pieces. And that gives us a chance to unwind and connect. But even during the week, it's quite common where we'll have the stand-up, and what typically happens is, a couple of people in the team will have a social conversation in front of everyone else. And I think, I could come in and say, come on, let's get to the stand-up, let's start talking. But I tend to let those things go because I think it just mimics an exchange in person where people are socially connecting. And you need those ingredients in a team that's fully remote. I think the other thing we try and do as well is we try and determine what we can work on asynchronously over Slack, over Figma, versus what we need to talk about and what we need to get on a Google Meet for as well. And that's really important because people work at different paces and not everything requires a virtual call. We can deal with it on Slack. We can work asynchronously and give people time to think about something and then come back. So I think some of those things.
Damian, I'm intrigued because also fully remote organization. So I'm here to, part of the series is Joel stealing ideas from the CTOs to do himself. So this is part of. Tell me. Oh, of course. I'm very interested in the class that you talk about playing the games, because we do a lot of the other things you described, but I know a lot of my guys are, as always with most IT people, into video games, board games, etc. So what do you play? Like, is it online shooters? Is it board games online? What's the sort of practicality of is it everybody playing the same thing?
There's a few different games that we play. We play. Have you ever played Werewolf?
Yes, the Midnight Werewolf game.
The Midnight Werewolf game. So we play that.
That's good. Yeah, okay. Because they can have a lot of people in it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we tend to have, most of the time, we'd probably have 7 to 8 people kind of join the call, and you can still play it with that volume of people. That I still find that fun because you're judging whether people are lying or what their body language looks like, and that's been fun doing that. There's other games we play around. I can't remember some of the names, but there's drawing games where you've got to guess what other people are drawing without telling them what you're drawing, and
so it's a lot of like those sort of party games, the Jackbox, if you will, kind of.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And it's not a drop in any. This is the time set aside. If you want to join. If you don't, that's fine. It's an optional kind of activity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And I think at the end of the week, it just allows everyone to kind of decompress and you have a bit of a laugh. There's been the odd occasion where we haven't played anything and we've just got on a call and we've had a chat, just talked about, had a bit of a laugh and just talked about bits and pieces. And I think that that's great as well. And bring a drink, bring some food, bring some snacks.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, so I think that, and like I said, I'm not going to take claim to that. I inherited that when I joined the business. But
what about you personally? So you've said that you're a person that gets energy from other people and gives people energy. So you like to be around people, but you're working fully remote. So what do you do personally to get that energy or environment if you're just working from home?
Yeah, so I mean, our head office is in Sydney, so I'll travel to Sydney probably every 6 to 7 weeks, and when I travel, I'll be there for anywhere between 2 to 4 days. But for me personally, that's not enough. So there's a few things I do. My personal exercise and mental well-being is really important, particularly with working remote. So I'll train and go to the gym every morning, Monday to Friday, and I'll get up at 6, be in the gym, for about an hour. And my gym's only 5 minutes down the road. So that physically and mentally sets me up for the day. I block out my calendar 90% of the time. I can use that time, but I block out my calendar every day from 1 till 2, and I'll leave my office here and I'll walk my dog for about 50 minutes, and we cover about 6Ks, and I typically come back in time for the team stand up at 2 o'clock. So those two things for me are ceremonies that 90% of the time I will prioritize, because I think I will be the best version of myself with the training and the exercise in the morning and the walk.
It helps you get out of the house. I mean, I do similar. I run every day, so I do a 5-ish K run every day. Most of the time, it's time to do myself. Sometimes busy days, I'll be on a team. I'll be on a call where I don't need to actually be involved too much. I just need to listen in, kind of thing, and so I'll do those. But I prefer to be able to just run. It gets me out of the house. I can listen to a podcast and just block out everything to do with work. And I go to the cycle and I come back in and refresh. If you don't do that, you run the risk of, when you work at home, never leaving home.
Yeah, that's a really good point to break it up. And I've found podcasts to be, just for me personally, with my own growth and my own learning, walking the dog and listening to a podcast. And these things sound very simplistic, but making the time and having the time, prioritizing the time to do those things has helped me grow and to keep learning, because I'm not in an office observing and learning from other people as much anymore. So I need to keep stimulated and keep growing and learning. And I'm not one of those people that'll pick up a business book every 2 weeks and read a book and then get onto the next book. I'm not built that way. So listening to audiobooks and podcasts for me over the last 3 years in particular has been incredibly important to keep learning and keep growing and keep stimulated. And the other thing is meditation and breathing. Like, it's something for me that's been really, really important over the last 2 years in particular. I've been very purposeful in certain meetings with certain peers, particularly when you've got a whole bunch of people working in head office and you're remote, asking the right questions to make sure that my perception of what's happening in the business is actually accurate with actually what is going on in head office, because I get a certain perception and a feel for things working remote and being on virtual calls, but I know that is not entirely accurate because I'm not in the office. I'm not having all off-the-cuff conversations that everyone else is having. So there are certain times where I feel like I need to make sure that my perception of things is in sync with actually what's happening. So I'll be very purposeful with the types of questions I ask to make sure that I'm completely aligned with what's happening. And for me personally, that's really important.
I really struggled with that when I worked for a company. They were in Melbourne and I was here. I really struggled to find out what's the tone, like how are things going, and I'd love to know how you did that, because I felt like it was maybe I was prying or trying to find out, but I was just trying to get a sense of what is today like how are people feeling and what's the tone and what's the energy in the office, and you really miss that when you're removed from it and people are at a different cadence than you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key things, I have a lot of people come to me most days on Slack asking for particular things or asking for help for something. And I'm always and I'm there to help them, but I will always make time and ask them, well, what's the context? Why is this important now? Because I can just understand the background context behind that. So, it could be, can you answer these questions for this security questionnaire for this client prospect? So I rather just answering it and giving it back to the salesperson, I'll start asking questions around, well, why are we doing this now? What's the size of the client commercially? So just because they've probably talked about all this already in the office, but I'm not there. So that just helps me understand the priority and where things sit. And
all right, awesome. So that's a pretty good segue. From some of the stuff you've spoke about, we've obviously talked about the technology, the remote stuff, right? And what you've said is really important, is that human connection, and something that you really value and you want to try and maintain, which is a nice segue into your book that you're writing. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that and where you're at so far with it.
Yeah, so I'm writing a book at the moment titled Harmonizing Humanity in Systems, and it's my journey in technology leadership. The book is in relation to my career from 2010 through to 2017, and I started writing it in 2018 with the commute back and forth from work. Back then, we were on the train all the time and doing that. And so I've been writing it on and off now for since 2018. And the book is very much about my career over that 7-year period and the things I did to build a well-performing, highly engaged, happy technology team, and how that team led the charge for digital transformation within an organization that set us up for success because of the type of company we were in at the time. So the book is I'd like to think, a practical guide with very clear examples of what we did to attain success, and some of the things I did as a leader that didn't work either. So I touch on strategy, I touch on culture and positive sentiment, I touch on our roadmap and strategy in my technology team and the projects that we worked on, and I give some very clear examples on what those things were, my philosophy on strategy and people, and also a dedicated section that I haven't finished yet, but a dedicated section on paying kudos to the people in my team at the time and how important they were and what they did, because part of the purpose of this book is to pay it forward to them, to recognize their efforts and what they did, because I truly believe that we did something pretty special during that time. So I hope that people, when the book is finished, right now I'm going through the process of editing the book, and there have been certain sections that I've rewritten rather than edited. But I'm probably 3/4 of the way through editing it at the moment, and then I'll look for a professional editor to clean it up for me and give me the feedback on what I need to do to get it published. I hope that people can read that and take some practical advice on how to build a good, well-engaged team. And while some of the examples, probably from a technology perspective, are a little bit dated now because we're talking about 2010 to 2018, I still feel like the book is strong in the sense that how we went about things will stand the test of time, and how far forward you go. So yeah, I hope people take value out of that. And to me personally, it's a really important goal of mine to get it done and complete. So I'm hoping over the next 12 months it'll be finished and done and out in the ether.
Did you learn anything about yourself in the process that you didn't know from writing it?
I learned very quickly. It's very hard to write a book. Never been about before. It was structuring the story in a way that makes sense, because when you're in it and you know what you're saying and you know the context behind the words on the page, but then the acid test is, getting other people to read it and making sure that they take something out of it. And I'm kind of going through that now a little bit by giving bits and pieces to people. But I think one of the things I've learned through the process is don't take too long between breaks, because what happens is that the journey between that time doesn't shift, but how I want to tell the story has changed between 2018 and now. So rather than editing it, I find myself rewriting certain parts of it, and rewriting it is difficult. So I've tried to maintain the same tone, given how long I've taken to write it. So if I had to start again, I'd probably have better continuity in making sure I was doing a little bit every day or every week to get the initial draft done quicker. Because there were periods of time where I'd been writing for 6 months, for 10 months of my day job or other things that were going on in my life. And only in the last 6 months I've accelerated it a lot because I want to get it done. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
I can't remember who it was that said it. I think it was in another book, and they gave a tip, which is finish on mid-thought. So if you're writing something, finish halfway through a sentence. If you're like going to take a wee break, rather than finish the whole sentence, finish halfway through it. Because then when you pick it up, you've got half a sentence to start with. Which actually
that helps unless you leave it too long and then you get back going, what was I even thinking? I don't even understand where the sentence was going.
Well, that's what I've done. I've read certain paragraphs and chunks of some chapters. I've reread things and I've gone, I can't believe I wrote it like that. That's horrible. I have to rewrite it again. But it's 9 chapters and 42,000 words and 130 page Word doc. So I feel like
it's like looking through old code. You're like, why did I write it this way? What is going on here? What's yes?
Strategy that's not strategy. It's a rewrite.
Idiot. Who wrote this?
Yeah, it's no, it's been fun, and I will finish it. But yeah, it's it's a personal goal of mine to get it done and get it out there.
Well, Damian, thanks very much for taking the time to come on and share some of your wisdom, career. We've loved having you on the pod, mate. And thank you very much for your time.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I've loved the opportunity, and happy to come back in the future.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a great conversation, just meandering all over the place, which is the best kind of conversation. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Interesting topics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.